Of WorkFast TV. Here we talk about how the internet is changing how we all work together. Before we start, we'd like to thank our sponsor, SAP, for sponsoring WorkFast TV and workers everywhere. Today's show will delve into how our workspaces are changing and how you can even work in a cafe. Remember that over on fastcompany.tv, we are participating in live chat right now. Actually, it's on Twitter, and we'll work your questions into the show later. Before introducing our guest, I'm happy to introduce my co-host, Shel Israel.
Thank you, Robert. I see that you had that gig with Gentleman's Quarterly before you got here earlier today.
It's called My Wife Dressed Me.
I see.
No T-shirts on this show, you know.
Is your other job breaking kneecaps in Brooklyn? Or
something like that, yeah.
It looks good. Looks good.
Thanks.
So
it's been quite a week.
I had a great week. I was up at Tahoe. I was offline most of the time. I was on water. I was in woods.
I was preparing for a trip to Washington, D.C. next week, where we're going to meet with 5 congressmen and women. Hopefully Nancy Pelosi, which is supposedly the 3rd most powerful person in the United States. Right?
I'd like to see her considered for vice president, but you know, for the sake of the show, I think you're breaking new ground. Yeah. You know, I usually give you a little, I can't use that word, trouble on the air, but it's really good to see a guy who 3 years ago was a Microsoft geek talking to the people inside the Beltway. Yeah. And having those people maybe have something real to say about technology. Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens there. This past week, I interviewed the CEO of Salesforce.com, Mark Benioff, and he had a lot of stuff to say about what we talk about on this show. You know,
we ought to get him on the show.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun, and he told me all sorts of fun stuff about how they really bet on this world 10 years ago, and their bets are really paying off. They had a remarkable quarter this last quarter. So. And he talked a little bit of smack talk about Microsoft and how slow they were moving, and it was a good interview. Yeah. Anyways, what are we supposed to do now?
You're supposed to introduce the guy over here.
I'm supposed to introduce him?
You didn't let me talk about the Prius, though.
You want to talk about Priuses?
One quick observation. I don't know if it's about yes, it is. It's about productivity, and it leads into our guest in a lot of ways. Yeah. I've gone on 4 road trips in 2 months, and each time we go, you can't help but notice the number of Priuses increasing and the number of SUVs decreasing. Yeah. I think I figured out the answer when at Tahoe I hit a new record of $4.91 a tank. Yeah. A gallon. You know, so it used to be a tank.
It's getting pretty crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy, but it's also interesting that the world is going Prius so quickly, at least here in Northern California.
Well, last night on the news they announced that the Ford F-150 is no longer the #1 selling car because of that people are not buying trucks and SUVs anymore. They're buying the Honda Civic now as the #1 selling car. So
yeah.
So anyway, so about our guest, I'm really honored, and actually it mixes in all this stuff: working and trying to save gas and politics, which we'll get into in a second. But. We have Sanford Dickert here from New York City, and actually we were supposed to have Vic and Dotra on, so we should cover just a little bit of...
You never told him till...
Oh, I did.
Don't tell him.
Vic and Dotra at Google had an emergency meeting, so that's why I met you this week at a conference, and I said, hey.
You can do this kind of thing, no problem.
You know, the janitor was busy. No,
it's all right, Shel, I'm here for you.
Yeah. Anyways, you're a unique guy, and we've met lots of times. You're a technologist, social media marketer, a democratic consultant. Used to work for the John Kerry campaign. Yep. We'll talk a little bit about that. You're a systems engineer, former dance instructor. Are you going to teach us any moves?
Not today. No. It's about co-working.
This is not the can you dance show.
Well, the idea, I'm not sure who's going to lead in this party.
Yeah, but you should be doing a samba in that shirt.
A samba in this shirt. Well, no, because I was one of those challenges of making sure I had something other than striped, and so this was the only shirt because I just saw it and just bought it. There's some great sales here in San Francisco.
But the reason I really was excited to have you on the show was you're one of the leading coworker gurus or visionaries, I guess. You know, one of the few people who started that movement along with Tara Hunt and Chris Messina and who was the other guy? I always forget.
Oh, I know the third name, and I just saw it too, and I keep forgetting that. It's like now you're asking me on the spot. Let me be really clear, is that I've just been an instigator in various things, and so during the time I moved to New York, which was right after the Kerry campaign, I was looking for something like this, and so I just saw what was happening and helped other people do it. And so the creation of CooperBricolage, which I'll show you later, was based on that need. There's a lot of people that were looking for it. No one knew exactly what to do. Jelly had already started. Amit, I can't remember his last name suddenly, who created Jelly in New York. So that was the first in-house co-working situation, and that started it.
Let me jump in right there, because every few years we have a co-something. There's codependency, there's co-counseling.
Okay.
And now we have co-working.
Right.
And for a lot of people watching this show, the first question is, what is co-working?
Okay. Co-working is along the lines of extending what you have at home or what you would like to have at work into another space. And so many people immediately when they hear co-working, they see a bunch of people on laptops at Starbucks. That's not co-working. Co-working is more of a philosophy as well as a space where the community comes together to work with each other, share the concepts. Actually started out here in San Francisco. I know Tara and Chris Messina
Tara Hunt
created,
and Chris Messina from Citizen Agency. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
and they created Citizen Space, which they were able to get a space and offer it open to everyone else. As you could rent desks, you could just come in and drop in, as I did just earlier this week when I needed a space to work on my stuff in between the Supernova conference I was at. The idea then is people who are there, it's not just a micro office or a cubicle to sit down at. Other people have talents that they share in terms of working. So the idea is that there are web designers, there are other knowledge workers who are coming together and sharing in their skill sets and growing the community. So in one of my favorite examples is Independence Hall in Philadelphia. A gentleman who is a web designer got the inspiration and started doing this, collecting all of the people that were interested in the same kind of space. Created a community in 9 months, just going to bars and events. They then bought a space, and now they're creating a company with the freelancers and the co-workers in that space doing web design, social media strategy, development. They're even working with the government in Philadelphia to help expand this concept.
Okay, let me ask the bottom line question for this show, though. Is the space organized so that you have certain available talent, or is it somewhat ad hoc? And if it's ad hoc, how does it improve productivity?
Okay. It is ad hoc, and the productivity increase is based primarily on the community space, the comfort for the people, and also the sharing of knowledge. Whereas if you're in an office, usually you're behind a door doing only your work. But for example, and there was a conversation about Delancey Street Cafe, they were doing this about 3-4 years ago where people would be working on their computers, playing the game of, hey, I'm going to develop a company, but I don't know this aspect of Rails. They would literally stand up and go, anybody know this? Next thing you know, someone would go, oh yeah, by the way, let me help. And so the freedom to share, the openness of the knowledge was what co-working sort of got founded on. And so we've just continued the premise.
Okay. We as Cooper's Bricolage, which is the one you instigated.
Well, yeah, that's kind of funny to say it that way. The instigation was that when I moved to New York, right after the campaign, I was looking for where was something similar to the Valley. I lived here for 12 years. I'd helped start a couple of companies. And I was looking for this collaboration. It's very difficult because New York is an intimidating space. I mean, something about very large buildings in the way, and you're a technologist, you're not a financier, you're not a lawyer, what have you. I slowly but surely found the different groups and found like people. And so just like here in here in San Francisco, those people came together, and one of the initial ideas after watching Jelly, which was in somebody's home, I was working at Cooper Union.
What's Jelly?
Jelly is a home-based co-working. So once a month, or once every 2 weeks, somebody will say, I'll have a co-working event. They'll bring people through a wiki to their home. For the first half, they're working, they go to lunch together just like you would with your coworkers, and then right after that, they do other things like share knowledge and so on. Think of it as a mini unconference. So I heard about that, I went to one, I was like, but this isn't what I want. And I didn't have the finances, to basically buy a space, and I didn't have the community yet. So the first thing that happened was while I was working at Cooper, the interesting part was that there was a cafe, or actually a restaurant around the corner, who only worked in the evenings from 5:30 to I think it was 10 or 11 o'clock. I ended up talking to the owner and suggested, hey, why don't I use your space during the day? And so we actually were CooperBricolage from 9 to 5, and then we did this changeover at 5 to 5:30, and then it was the restaurant again. So we got really great Cuban food, by the way.
Thus the shirt.
Thus the shirt. And so we were having a lot of fun getting people working together. And from there, I call him the champion. If you've ever read Ori Brofman's The Starfish and the Spider.
Yeah. One of his favorites. Yep.
Yeah, he basically a good friend from the past. I'm the catalyst, and Tony, and I'm going to try to get this right, Bacigalupo.
Tony B.
Yeah, Tony B. That's what I keep calling him, but it's an amazing name. He basically became the champion, talking about co-working as well. And so he's been at the forefront while I've been doing a lot of the back-end work. So I like to inspire and instigate change, and then other people carry it forward. The best line I heard from someone else is, you can tell a really good entrepreneur by the number of arrows in their back.
Yep.
So I have tried to do this, and Tony, who is enthusiastic beyond belief, created a new concept with some of the other members of the CooperBricolage Governance Committee, or the CooperBric-Com. Having some fun. And I can show you, for example, some of the sites that we've done.
I didn't do that one.
It's okay. We had fun.
I could have done that one.
We tried. But I can show you, for example, what we've done. And on the web, everyone keeps asking, how do you actually manage? You're asking about productivity. So the real thing is trying to make it convenient for people who need knowledge to connect with other people with the right kind of knowledge. So in this particular case, this is our our blog, which Tony designed, and it gives a lot of information. I was just showing you this particular site and the page. We talk about what's going on at the space, and we ended up, because by the way the restaurant closed, we ended up moving our space to Grahamstown, which is a cafe about 4 blocks away from where we were before. And we actually work with New York Wireless, I believe is the name of the company, that's doing the work. Trying to see if there's information here. You can find it on our website. It's at CooperBricolage.com, or Kubrick. And we also use a wiki, which we have been sharing information about the New York tech resources, which is very tough to find, because where do you find a trusted source? Well, we provided this wiki, and then we ended up going with sort of a login page. And then last but not least, we have a Twitter feed as well as a Google group. Now what's happened since is that we've been focusing on trying to get a real space. As many of the people who told us in the beginning, this will never work, going into a restaurant, no, not going to happen. Actually, it did work. We have a really vibrant community, and what we've done is we're working with some other people who are in the space, such as a gentleman by the name of John McGann, who runs a site called Newtopia, which is essentially another kind of shared office space. And we are working to create this, which is New Work City, the new way to work. The idea is that it's a co-working space. It's the same kind of technologies that we're talking about where you're at a Starbucks, but the difference is you're focusing on an open plan, you're sharing the space, you respect other people's time. We have like a phone booth that's already designed into the space. We even have a beautiful upstairs so that we have great events. It's designed for the community to collaborate, because it's not easily accessible now. Yeah. There's a lot of challenges in space. So we're creating this for that purpose.
Will it have good meeting rooms and stuff like that?
We have actually a conference space that we're planning on. Actually, we've already set it up. The idea is you'll be able to have more events, because here you can easily go to somebody's open plan space and have a party, and you can walk around and talk and have presentations. Yeah. In New York, we end up using lawyers' offices. Yeah. Actually, a lot of the events tend to be in these very long boardroom type spaces. And boy, oh boy, you really connect in those kind of moments. The idea was to create a space that's more comfortable, more collaborative, like you see here in San Francisco. Yeah. And so we've been building it out, and we're working really hard to get this done.
I was reading up on co-working. There's co-working facilities now all over the world, aren't there? This idea really has grown from, and it was Brad Newberg, by the way.
Thank you.
Chris Terra, Brad Newberg, and Chris Messina's idea to really become a worldwide event. Sort of like how Bar Camp has spread from a camp that started in Palo Alto, California, and now there's bar camps in India and China and all over the place. It's crazy.
I went ahead and actually pulled out a list of all of the groups. So For example, there's Citizen Space in San Francisco, Citizen Space, as I mentioned, Hat Factory. There's Sandbox Suites, which is sort of a cross between it, but it's still relative co-working. Yeah. In Menlo Park, there's Cubes and Crayons. There's a whole list. If you go to, and I'll show you on the site, there's a blog.
Now, Hat Factory, actually, you can live there as well, right?
I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard this one, but okay.
Well, I know one of my former workers had his office there and his house. So
okay.
He would live upstairs, and then the downstairs was the co-working area. So that was pretty cool. And again, you don't need to drive across town to go to your office, right?
Yeah.
It's right there.
The whole idea, and I should tell you that I got a lot of my lessons straight out of the co-working community blog and the co-working wiki that you can find at blog.coworking.info.
Okay.
And you can take a look, and this is where a lot of the co-workers are sharing their information. It's more of an announcement list now, and people talk. We're also on a Google group, so we communicate with each other that way. And there's also other sites. And my favorite one that I like to show in terms of the design is what Alex Hillman did, which is Independence Hall. It's my favorite visual design. They basically got a space. Within 2 months, the space was profitable. And they are now doing amazing things, creating a company out of the coworkers there, sharing in the capabilities.
Yeah. You guys are great with names, I have to tell you. All of these are really cool names. How many people are involved in co-working overall?
There is no answer to that, because it's sort of like saying how many people are running small businesses, how many people are knowledge workers. It is people who are not in big businesses or in companies. They are looking to build companies. For example, some of our tenants, if you want to call it that way, are actually coworkers, are 2-3-man companies, people companies. There are individual freelancers. There are also groups of people, like one person that was talking to us last year was Nick Denton from Gawker Media. He was in desperate need at that time, from what I understand, for additional space for his editors. So he was talking to us about getting 5 desks in our space. The interesting part is that it's meant to be flexible, and the concept is sharing. It's an open space. It's meant to drive education and raise the conversation. In Philadelphia, now they're seeing an increase of technology and creativity. In New York, I've been using the same argument. There's a lot of enthusiasm for creative efforts. For example, writing. There's a space called Paragraph NY, which is only for writers, and it's kind of like a co-working space. There is an acting space. There is an artist space. We even have NYC Resistor, which is, I kid you not, a shop where guys get together and solder. It's in Brooklyn, it's in a little scary space, but it's fun. It's a really nice enthusiasm. Nobody is trying to do the same thing in terms of technology, thinking in New York, or maybe they do, in growing that kind of enthusiasm for creativity of technology. That's part of the reason that I do a lot of work at Cooper Union. Cooper was very much, Peter Cooper, the founder of Cooper Union, was an inventor and intentionally was about creativity. He was about sharing the knowledge, and that was part of the genesis of the CooperBricolage conversation.
Yeah. What do you need, so a guy like me is working at home, getting really bored, is missing that social connection to other people, wants to join a co-working. What do I need to worry about? What do I need to worry about before I sign a contract with somebody or get involved? Is there
anything to worry about?
Yeah, you know, is there something I have to think about legally, or you know, like when I get into a lease, I have to think about, can I afford this for 2 years, or however the length of the lease is. Is it a month-to-month kind of thing? Can I get out if I don't like it, or do I sign up?
Solutions. It depends on the space. For example, at Independence Hall, they offer a month-to-month contract, and they also offer a drop-in situation. With Newark City, we're building out we call it a co-op model, where someone can actually rent for a year, get a reduction in the cost versus a month-to-month versus a day drop-in rate. So it depends on the space, and truthfully, there is no one model. The fun part is that we're all learning, and we communicate on the Google group that you know about, the co-working group, and the idea is that we're sharing the knowledge to grow better co-working spaces. And in 1 year, or 2 years I should say, it's grown immensely. As I mentioned, you can look at the number of spaces. I think it's about 30 or 40 spaces, not only in the US, but also around the world.
Cool.
You got any good stories that have happened in co-working, one suitable for a family business audience?
One suitable for a family business audience. Can't think of a good story outside of the fact that when you see people working together, for example, the Google Android launch or Facebook developers' efforts that we've done, you've seen people connect and create businesses with each other. So the family energy is, it's the sharing and the opportunistic situations that occur. And so, case in point, these guys were working on coming up with an idea. They were doing a Ruby development effort. Suddenly they went, wait, this could be a business, and literally ran off to go start a new business. It's opportunistic, it's sharing, it's collaborating, it's working together and using the tools, the wikis, the blogs, Twitter even, it's kind of fun to play, and the Google groups to share and collaborate. And our biggest challenge right now is figuring out how to help people know who's there. And as I showed you, we have a wiki that we're doing it with, but it's not enough. Presence, information, location-based services that'll help when you want to connect with a designer, a copywriter, someone who knows government. That's important to find. And so that's one of the challenges.
Yeah. Somebody was asking about non-disclosure agreements on Twitter right now, and I don't know what they exactly mean, but if I have a non-disclosure agreement with a company, I have to abide by that, right? So I can only talk about that in the private areas of the office, right, that aren't going to be shared, right?
And there's that legal aspect, that's a different story. We haven't really addressed it, and it's funny because these are all things we grow and learn about. One challenge, for example, is the insurance that you have to take care of for individual companies. Yeah. So we're working with people, we've been talking with Freelancers Union about how that would work. And Freelancers Union is a group that started in New York City and is doing some amazing things in healthcare, as in healthcare insurance. Great pricing for freelancers, and they're coming up with new services.
As a freelancer, I'm interested. We'll talk after
yes,
the show about this. It's a big issue for me.
Yeah.
Richmond asked, how are you growing the model? Are you there's not really a movement, although you guys have a website, a wiki, a blog, and stuff like that. Is it just organically growing, or is there some other force that you're trying to market or something like that?
Well, the funny part is that people sit here and wonder, why are we doing this? It's not just because we want to get out of our homes. It's about sharing and creating an opportunity. One of the things that I've talked about with government is about increasing the economic viability of an area for a particular market, in this particular case, technology and entrepreneurship. It's very challenging when you've got all sorts of other attractive options. Yeah. So that's part of it. The other parts that are occurring with the economy, people are nervous about what's going to happen next. And so the idea is that we're saying, if you need to use your skills in another way, we actually are working to help and collaborate with others to find other business. I'm not a Flash designer, for example. Yeah. So two of my people that I know in the space do some of my Flash work, so I'm giving them business. So what we're expecting is that if the economy does go south, there will be a need for low-cost sharing space, a cooperative model. You share in the limited resources you have.
Right. So we're about to switch into where we should be taking questions from the audience, but we don't have that many questions, and I've been asking them anyways live. Tell me a little bit about your political experience. What did you do for the Kerry campaign? And how does that fit into this? Because I bet there's a tie.
There is a tie, and it was funny when I first accidentally got into the campaign was...
What did you do there first?
I was the chief technology officer of the campaign, so I helped build a lot of the technical infrastructure and a lot of the initial, what we now call social media efforts. I worked with various people in the campaign. I accidentally got into it by meeting somebody at a barbecue who wondered what I was talking about in terms of e-groups and Google groups and why everyone in London knew about Howard Dean and had no clue about John Kerry. And 2 months later ended up becoming the campaign manager due to his connection with the Kerry campaign. Or sorry, became the CTO. Yeah. People kept asking, why are you doing this? Are you looking forward to a job in the White House? I was like, no. Governance is a whole different body. I was very interested in basically changing the direction the country was going in. I lived abroad for 4 years, and it was embarrassing at times, because I had to apologize often enough.
What countries were you in?
I was in London, England, I was in Paris and France, I was in Italy. I was doing a lot of work with venture capitalists, working on strategy, technology advancement, and so on. And so it was an accident that I got to the campaign. It was always my intent to learn what it was like to do grassroots campaigning and apply it to business. This is the whole social media, blogging, and what's now evolved into the relationship that you develop online. Clue Train Manifesto, 100%. So for campaigns, it's a bit of a challenge. They're used to the centralized model. They're used to working on, here's the message, this is what we have to send out, so we're consistent because of the idea of PR. the dialogue that goes on outside is very challenging, and we worked on it at the Kerry campaign with a number of really interesting people. Howard Reinhold, who was part of our Democratic Community Committee. It was kind of cool. DemCom, we called it. We had a Dem Tech Committee that was trying to do technology at the time, innovating in the middle of what's going at 150 miles an hour train going, we have to get this man elected. Yep. You really couldn't change things quickly. And it's kind of interesting to see what's going on with Obama.
You're also, I've known you as part of the social media community for a long time, and obviously for both Robert and I, that's a very hot button. And you've been talking about it a little bit, but how does social media play into both the roles of co-working and politics? And let me add, you were, I think, in the room last year at Supernova, where I got on a soapbox and said, what politicians are doing, are they using social media to bring money in and get messages out, but they're not using it for conversations? Is it coming? And that's a long question.
It's a long question, and it's a long answer, because consider the following thing. Robert is a unique character in the world of social media.
That again.
In the fact that when we've talked about how many blogs you read, the feeds you read, the number of people you respond to, and you've made a business out of this. But it is, I'm assuming, a 20-hour-a-day effort. Political campaigns are running on the basis of, especially campaigning, not governing. Campaigning is a challenge because you have to deal with all sorts of people, all sorts of lives, whether it's the high-dollar donor, it's the passionate activist, it's the uninterested worker who's like, yeah, you're really going to do something. That politician has a lot of work to do, and he's got a lot of people around him, he or she, in the fact that you've got to manage your time. The conversation can happen with other people, and what we were doing at Kerry was working with some of the other individuals in charge of, let's say, the policy topics, and getting them into the conversation. We implemented at Kerry a ECRM, an email CRM solution, that would then drive those messages to the various people so they could respond to individuals. That was our goal, to get the conversation going. It's tough. Think about it. You've got one individual running for office needing to speak and know everything. It's not an easy thing yet. It'll happen. There's one candidate I was working with about a year and a half ago who loves using the blogs and basically was on Daily Kos all the time. But he was running for Congress. So a congressman might have a little more time than a presidential candidate.
Their lives are so scripted. In fact, going to D.C. next week, we're interviewing in 15-minute blocks, and we're going to get them for 15 minutes. It's going to be very strict, and my schedule is very scripted. So I have 7 interviews in one day, and it's like boom, 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 and we have to get in, do a very quick interview, and get out. It's a rough life, I guess. It's
funny because with Kerry, one of the things we ended up having to do is literally to do like an audio podcast. He would be running to his car, I'd be running after him with a mic to get him to say this line that was on a card, and he'd go, blah, 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 and then leave. And then it was like, hello, Senator Kerry, goodbye. And that was about the extent of it. It's really insane, and especially when things are taking off and being as exciting as more than likely what's going on with the campaigns, both Obama and McCain, they have no time. And the congresspeople who are dealing with the machinations of the Beltway, and also the needs of constituents and their fundraising and all of the other issues that go on. I should do a plug for Personal Democracy Forum that's occurring next week.
Yeah, I'm speaking there on Monday.
So. Okay, and they're talking about this very issue, about how after campaigning it's about governance. And so the challenge is, how do you actually make it transparent and engage?
Well, it's unbelievable. We're at the end of a great half an hour. Interesting to see how people are saving gas and working closer to home rather than having to travel a long way to visit a far-off office. Thanks so much for giving us a look into your world. And I'm going to talk to the camera now. Michelle, it's interesting to see that what we're learning from just our first few guests. Before we talk about next week's guests, I just want to remind everyone that there's an after-show party at kite.tv/Scobalizer, where Sanford and I will talk more with you all after the show, and we'll get a lot more into how he used some of the lessons in politics in the co-working spaces he's doing. After the party, I will be on the Gilmore Gang, actually, after that, which starts live at 10:45. Hi, Steve Gilmore.
You're like Kerry, you know, you're just everywhere.
I'm everywhere.
Ubiquitous Robert Scoble.
I'm calling myself the social media fungus now. Everywhere you don't want me to be. But Steve's having Mozilla
I have this itch.
Yeah. That Scoble thing is itching me, right? Steve's having Mozilla CTO Brendan Eich on, and that's going to be an interesting conversation. Stick around and participate both at kite.tv/Scobalizer after the show, and let us know who you'd like to see on future shows. We're going to have some pretty good guests, which we'll hear in just a second. Actually, Shel, what's on next week?
Next week we have two people, Michelle Azar and Gary Calling from Best Buy. They're going to tell us all about Blue Shirt Nation, which is a behind-the-firewall social network of 20,000, a little more than 20,000 now, and it should be a pretty exciting show.
So we're ready to go. So get to work.
We'll get it right next week, we promise.